All right, let's get into it. We're always taught that finance is this hard science. It's all about spreadsheets and formulas and big data. But what if I told you the single biggest factor in building wealth has almost nothing to do with how smart you are and absolutely everything to do with how you behave? That's the core idea from Morgan Housel's incredible book, and we're going to break down why your psychology, not your IQ, is the real key to mastering money.
To really get this, let's just look at two guys. On one side, you have Ronald Reed, a janitor, and on the other, Richard Foscone, a Harvard-educated top-tier finance executive. Now, just looking at their resumes, you'd think their financial stories would be, worlds apart. And they were, just not in the way anyone would ever expect. So Ronald Reed lived this incredibly simple, humble life. He worked with his hands, lived in the same tiny house, and just quietly put away whatever he could. He invested his savings into big, stable companies, blue-chip stocks. And then he just waited for decades. When he passed away, this completely unassuming janitor had a fortune of over $8 million. Just unbelievable.
Now, Richard Foscone was the exact opposite. On paper, he had everything. The best education, a high-flying career, he even retired early to focus on philanthropy. But his lifestyle just got bigger and bigger. He borrowed a ton of money to fund this lavish life, and when the 2008 financial crisis hit, poof, that whole debt-fueled world just came crashing down. He lost everything.
So what's the difference here? The crucial point is, it wasn't about knowledge. Foscone knew 1,000 times more about finance than Reed did. The difference was pure behavior. Reed practiced patience and frugality. Foscone gave in to greed and arrogance. See, financial success isn't a hard science. At the end of the day, it's a soft skill.
Okay, so if behavior is the real key, where does our financial behavior even come from? Well, it turns out we are all looking at the world of money through a completely unique lens, one that's been shaped by our own personal history.
I mean, think about this quote for a second. It's such a wild idea. The tiny, minuscule sliver of economic history that you have personally lived through dictates almost everything you believe about how money works. This is exactly why one person's crazy financial move makes perfect sense to them. They've just experienced a totally different world.
For example, take a look at this. If you were born in 1970, the stock market went up tenfold during your teens and 20s. The lesson you learned? Stocks are amazing wealth-building machines. But if you were born just 20 years earlier, in 1950, the market went absolutely nowhere during those same formative years. The lesson you learned? Stocks are a great way to lose money.
And it's the exact same story with inflation. If you grew up when prices were just soaring in the 70s and 80s, you learned to be terrified of inflation. But if you grew up in the last 30 years or so, it's probably been a total non-issue for you. So you see how two perfectly intelligent people can end up with opposite but equally logical conclusions, all based on when and where they happen to be born.
But our personal perspective isn't the only thing going on here. Beyond our experiences, every single financial outcome out there is also being guided by these two powerful invisible forces, pure random chance. We're talking about luck and its twin brother, risk.
What are the odds of 1 in a million? It's the kind of thing that doesn't just change a life, it creates a legend.
Well, those were the odds that a young Bill Gates would end up at Lakeside School back in 1968, one of the only high schools on the entire planet that actually had a computer. He said it himself, without that 1 in a million stroke of luck, Microsoft probably never would have happened.
But risk is just the flip side of that exact same coin. Gates' best friend, Kent Evans, was just as smart, just as driven. They were going to conquer the world together. But Kent experienced a different 1 in a million event, a fatal mountaineering accident while they were still in high school. The same incredible odds, just working in opposite, and in this case, tragic directions.
So our behavior is shaped by our experiences and by pure chance. Now let's dig into the specific behaviors for not just building wealth, but, and this is so important, for keeping it, because they are two very, very different skills.
Getting wealthy? Yeah, that often requires taking big risks. It requires optimism, putting yourself out there. But staying wealthy, that requires almost the exact opposite. It takes humility, a healthy dose of fear, and a deep focus on survival above absolutely everything else. The skills that make you money are simply not the same skills that keep you money.
This brings us to probably one of the most powerful ideas in all of finance, and it's perfectly captured in this story.
At a party, the author Kurt Vonnegut told his friend Joseph Heller that their billionaire host made more money in a single day than Heller's famous novel, Catch-22, had made in its entire history. And Heller's reply was just, "Yes, but I've something he will never have. Enough."
And the danger of not knowing what enough is, well, it can be catastrophic. Rajat Gupta was worth $100 million, and yet he threw it all away for an insider trading scheme just so he could become a billionaire. Bernie Madoff had a wildly profitable, completely legitimate business, but it wasn't enough. He risked it all for a massive Ponzi scheme. They both gambled something they had and needed for something they absolutely didn't.
Right, so we know staying wealthy is about survival and having a sense of enough, but what is the single most powerful tool for getting wealthy in the first place? I promise you, it's probably not what you think.
When you see Warren Buffett's net worth, $84.5 billion, your mind immediately goes to investing genius. And look, he absolutely is. But his skill as a stock picker, that's not the whole story. It's not even close.
So what is his secret? What's the hidden force multiplier that created that astronomical wealth?
Well, to find it, just look at this number. $81.5 billion. It's almost his entire fortune. And what it represents is
The amount of his wealth that he accumulated after he qualified for Social Security. Just let that sink in for a second. Buffett's skill is investing, but his real secret is time. He's been a phenomenal investor for over 75 years, since he was literally a kid. That's the real magic here, the mind-bending power of compounding over an entire human lifetime.
So let's bring all of this home. What is the single most important lesson we can pull from all these stories and ideas?
Here it is. The goal isn't to be a genius who hits home runs and earns astronomical returns. Those are usually just one-off flashes in the pan. The real goal is to get pretty good returns that you can sustain for decades and decades. It's all about survival and longevity, because that's what gives compounding, the most powerful force in the universe, the time it needs to do the heavy lifting for you.
And that leaves us with one final question to really chew on. The next time you see someone making a financial choice that just looks completely irrational, pause for a second and ask yourself, given everything we know about how our unique history shape us, what might they have lived through that makes that crazy decision feel perfectly logical to them?